welcome everyone. Good to see everybody after the Christmas holidays. And we have, first off, I want to make a comment about a changed agenda item. One of the updates originally scheduled for today was an update on the work being done with community-based accountability work. And as you know, in an email I sent, Lindsay Harris' father passed away, and the funeral is today. And we felt like she needed to be here to help represent that work, and so did some others. And we also felt like someone from our team needed to be able to go to the funeral. Obviously, Lindsay did not get to have voice of what date that would be set for the funeral. And so in that planning, we felt like if we move CBAS to next month, we can still cover it while we do our other student performance updates and such. But we also wanted some teammates to be able to be there with her. So our just thoughts and prayers with Lindsay and her family. Pretty tough battle that her father went through and them all together. So we did move that agenda item. I appreciate your patience with us. And so our thoughts and prayers with that family. His name is Penrod Harris. With thoughts and prayers with him today. So with that, we have updates on budget and chiller grant loan. We do not need a closed session. And so what we thought we would do was let Kirby and his team go first with the chiller update. And guys, come on down.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Kirby. All right. Sports Services. Kara DeBosky, she's our district energy manager. So,
Okay.
So real quick, just want to talk about the EVHS chiller replacement grant program. Kind of run through SECO, which is the State Energy Conservation Office. That's right. That runs into the Texas Comptroller's office. So they came out with a program kind of through the American through one of the acts that came through the
American Recovery Act.
American Recovery Act. Kara did a ton of work for this, and I'm going to let her speak to a lot of it. And so funds are available through a special loan program to have to replace older chillers. And so we just kind of want to run you through that and kind of update you on some information there concerning those and kind of what that can do for the district and what benefits that can bring for us. So I'll let Kara kind of take over and run through some of that.
Like Kirby said, my name is Kara Delbosky. I'm the energy manager for the district. So at Eastview, currently, we have a 3-chiller system, but we're only operating on 2 chillers. The 3rd chiller's been ordered for replacement. We just have not, it's on its way, we just haven't received it yet. Without the first chiller of the 2 is operating fully and functional, it's doing great. The 2nd chiller is just operating. We're doing what we can to keep our heads above water as far as that chiller goes. Because without the 3rd chiller, the runtime doubles for the 2nd chiller, which is causing a serious increase on operational expenses. The district spent in 2021 over $10,000 in chiller repairs. And then just a year later, we spent over $40,000.
Can I get you to explain more succinctly what the chiller is? What it looks like and what it does?
Absolutely. So a chiller it takes cold water, it runs it through a compressor with refrigerant, which lowers the temperature of the water, and then it shoots it up into coils all along in this case for Eastview, it's 4 wings. And when the air that's pulled through the ducts goes past that coil that has this chilled water, it lowers the temperature of the air, which then is serviced air, and it goes down into the occupied area. When the water returns back, it runs past refrigerant again, which is super cold, then it chills the water, right, chiller, and then it goes right back up into the ducts again to chill the air as well. So it's just a continual process, closed loop.
So yeah, chillers are mainly used on really large buildings. You'll see them, they're about as big as this area. You can for one chiller, they're really big, kind of like a giant car radiator. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Big air conditioner.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And it's one of the most efficient systems you can use.
So Eastview is just way too big for heat pumps?
Yeah, so some campuses you could run, RTUs, rooftop units, and things like that, and you could do that. But Eastview being those big wings they have, so when they built Eastview, they built it on a chiller system. So, and thought that, and it really truly is the most efficient when it runs, but when it starts breaking down, it's very costly to fix and replace those big parts and things like that as we run into. And like Kara was saying, one's been down, and that we've ordered a replacement for. Kind of back in the April 22 board meeting, we approved some bond savings to purchase the one chiller because we knew it was down, and we used some savings to order that. Now that chiller has not come in. We've ordered it. We've got a long, year wait to get
Supply
the
chain.
Supply chain, right? So, which kind of, and Kara will get into it. It kind of helps us out a little bit because we have not received it yet. So we could actually roll that chiller into this program and actually save some bond funds to use elsewhere, other parts of the district that may need that and meets the requirement to use some bond savings to repair some other items throughout the district. So, which, the last bullet point there. And then.
Yep, so a couple of months ago, I applied for the Seco Cool Chillers program, which is funds that are provided by the American Recovery Act, which is administered through Seco, State Energy Conservation Office, and then that Seco is part of the State Comptroller's Office. So the program provides reimbursement loans for the replacement of chillers that are 12 years and older and all supporting equipment to be included but not limited to piping, drives, pumps, mechanical building, building mechanical controls.
So, as Kara went through that process, and it's only for a limited time, she works with Seco. They cap you at what they think your max percentage should be on your max amount. Now, it's done through the American Recovery Act, but that Seco kind of grant loan does carry an interest rate of 0.25%, which is, that's unbelievably cheap. Yeah, that's, you don't want to say free money, but it's close. Yes. But you still have to pay that back. You have to pay that back. So Kara went through that process, long process, met with the engineers, went through Seco, many different reviews, and we got accepted and passed in that program. And they gave us an allotment not to exceed $750,000 as the max allotment.
Okay, so last year alone, we paid over $300,000 in energy costs just to run our chiller system at Eastview. If we replaced both chillers and all auxiliary equipment, supporting equipment, that would generate a 16 to 20% annual energy cost savings, which is the numbers you see in the parentheses up there. So somewhere between $49,000 and $62,000. Based on the conversations that me and the team of engineers had, the amount for the project would not exceed $600,000. That, coupled with the 0.25% interest rate over a 15-year term, that puts the payment at $40,767.20. The engineers and I fully expect the energy savings will cover the majority, if not the entire annual payments to Seco.
Yeah, so, with that being said, and those are pretty conservative toward the engineer, that 16 to 20%. They're like, since you're replacing all the pumps and all the drivers, which we didn't have planned for the initial replacement for the bond savings because we didn't have the money to that because those pumps and drivers can get very expensive. We just had the money to replace the chiller, but by going through this program, we could do both chillers and all the supporting equipment for those chillers. So this, like I said earlier, this would allow us to kind of relocate some of the bond funds in. So about $200,000 of bond savings funds, elsewhere to another project in the district.
So, and lastly, I just want to include the specific items that would be included in the project. So it would be 2 new chillers, all piping run to and from the 2 new chillers. It would be 5 new pumps, 3 new drives, and the building mechanical system that would control both of those chillers to make it as efficient as possible. Again, I just want to state as well as that, we've had a lot of conversations with engineers who have said 600,000, we would not exceed that amount, but we would also be receiving a 5-year parts and maintenance warranty. So if anything were to happen to, I don't know, something on it, we wouldn't have to pay for it for 5 years.
So yeah, we'd like, we just want to kind of present this information to you. We'd like to take it to, a future board meeting to have, some approval or action, I guess, on that, so we can move forward with that process. We get 24 months if we finalize the program. We get 24 months to complete all the work, which should be ample time. It would get the other chiller ordered right away. So considering that's going to be, an 8 or 9 month, probably, wait time for that one. And then no payments, we don't start making payments until all work is completed. So about the end of 20 months or 24 months is that when, after that point when we'll start making the payments. So it kind of works in conjunction with, they're in place or installed, we're saving the energy, and then we start to make the payments versus, payments start right away when we're not even seeing the energy savings yet. So they kind of wait till they're installed and up and running and pass their final, SECO will make sure they pass their final inspections, before we have to start making any payments on that process. So really a good system. That interest rate is not going to be any cheaper to borrow money at that rate. But you should know, Dr. Bernal, you've seen that, and wish we could all take 0.25% loans out. So, but anyhow, I just want to present to you if y'all have any kind of questions, concerns. Yes.
Are there any other auxiliary costs that are not listed here? Or how many other chillers are in the district and what are their lifespans?
Yeah, what happens to the third chiller there?
So the third chiller is a newer chiller. It's not that old.
What's
It's about 9 going on 10 years old. So these are 15. These are 15, 16 years old. So even the third chiller is a little bit larger size chiller. So you got a bigger chiller, and you got kind of two kind of smaller ones. So these are the two smaller ones that were the first ones installed there at Eastview. And then when they kind of did the expansion there at Eastview, they came in and added a third larger chiller. So it doesn't meet the requirements of the program because it's not over 12 years old. And so, like I said, it's not 9 going on 10 years. It's still in good operating condition. But we get to add some piping, pumps, and drives that will support that big chiller and keep it going, make it efficient. So.
And other campuses have chillers?
Yeah, just one other campuses. They have we got a couple small chillers around. Is it Georgetown?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's at Georgetown. On the backside of Georgetown, we got 2 small chillers back there, but they're not near this size. They're much smaller chillers.
They were placed in 18, so they're not near old enough.
Anything else?
Anything else?
All right, so this potential to be on the agenda in January. We don't, assuming, we think January?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right,
Yes, sir.
perfect. All right, thank you guys.
Thank you for doing all the work and
Yeah.
getting this grant and knowing about it and so on like that.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Jennifer, Terry, you ready to go?
Ready. I'll let you drive.
So we're on budget update number 3, and Jennifer and Terry are gonna walk through us. This is largely focusing on some things that we've learned from this current year's budget and some adjustments that we're seeing, and then still working on approaches to the following year budget, and we're starting to sort of realize some things that there's not a decision to make yet, but there's some wrestlings we're doing that we want to make sure we talk to you about and go over sort of our approaches to how we're going to handle the budget. So, Jennifer.
Good morning. Everyone should have a hard copy of the presentation. For your permission. So, let's start with the timeline. So today, we are in our 3rd board budget workshop. We've got 3 more to go that are on the agenda, and then in June, we will be approving the budget for 23-24. So we've done some work, we've got more work to do, and then of course, with the legislature meeting starting today, Should they go beyond June, we may have some amendments that we're going to be probably dealing with based on the outcome of a legislative session.
And I will say before we go on that is something that what we learned in 2019 with House Bill 3, I think it was probably October to January before we really saw the real effect of what it was going to do to our recapture payments and such. And so one of the things that we're trying to stay on top of and be aware of is what are the potential actions that the legislators are going to take on budget, and also though the time it takes to see what really happens with when all the dust settles, so to speak. Also remember that prior to going to the July operating budget, most districts do this now, some still don't, but my first superintendency in 2006, one of the first things, we shifted to a July budget because you're trying to open a school year with no access to the budget funds. You guys remember what that's like. You're trying to hold on to money, trying to beg for money to figure out how to get the school year started. Well, we bring teachers back so early now, and our staff needs to prepare for their professional learning, et cetera. So adopting a budget to kick off in July means that your budget is going to be very fluid on projections and estimates to the best guess that you can in the sense of using the state template. Last year, in 2019, after the budget cycle, after the legislative session, we were on template like 41. They were constantly changing the budget template. And 2019, guys, was a very painful year for us. In the sense of not having good clarity, and we felt like at that time there was a lot more promising and underproducing. And it just sort of took us a while to really see what the effects of the legislation were. I can tell you at that time, I think there were a lot of lessons learned from the legislative level and local level as far as making sure that don't take too many actions too fast until you really understand with clarity what the legislators are going to do. And we just felt like there were some bold moves made in 2019 that they just didn't understand the full consequences of. We don't see that happening. We see them just mainly addressing the basic allotment. That is sort of the baseline that I think everyone has reached consensus on. The legislators that I've spoken with from this area seem to be focused on the basic allotment. All of the different groups that we get updates from is focusing on the basic allotment number, which is the true, that's where the gain is. And you can see, obviously, Raise Your Hand Texas is also advocating for the basic allotment movement. So going into this workshop is that anytime you have a legislative session, there are some uncertainties that you've got to think about what the direction's going, but don't extend yourself too far, but try to get close enough. So it's just a lot of communication with legislators that we can get as much as we can get, and it's also knowing that our hope is they will land the plane much earlier than they did in 2019. If they don't, we will continue to have amendments throughout the year. So that's sort of the landscape of the legislative session time. Sorry, Jim.
No, that's absolutely correct. So we've talked about these before, but just to very quickly go over the key budget factors that we deal with. Student enrollment, of course, is our biggest revenue driver. Average daily attendance, also called ADA, is also a revenue driver because that's what our state funding is based on currently in the formula. Not how many students we have, but how much they attend school. The basic allotment, like Dr. Brent talked about, it has remained flat for 4 years, $6,160 per student. And we know that our costs have increased with inflation and staffing increases. Our values, our taxable assessed property values, we are in a fast growth district. We have seen high increases in our property values, which affects the state funding formula as well, which affects recapture. And as we talked about, we are currently in a legislative session. Many of these items, we really have no control over as a district. We have to just stay abreast of the current happenings and try to react as quickly and as proactively as we can. On the expenditure side, we've talked about this again. Most of our expenditures are in payroll. We're a people business. 86% of our budget is in payroll and staffing. The other 14% are all our supplies and our contracted services and other operating expenditures. And then, of course, those two percentages are net of recapture, because in reality, a large part of our budget goes back to the state as a recapture payment. So let's talk a little bit about where we are now in 22-23. We have 5 months of actual activity. So we have July, August, September, October, and November, which is 5 months, almost half the year. We're closing out the month of December, so we're getting even closer with that. So based on the 5 months of actual activity and projecting out the rest of this current year that we're in, if we look at that first column, this is the approved budget that we are operating under that was approved in June of 2022. And you can see our total operating revenues. These are net of recapture. So we do back recapture out, and that is because we're really wanting to look just at our operational expenditures and our operational revenues. So we see that total operating revenues are $132.7 million. That's that first red row. Then our total operating expenditures are $142.6 million, which gives us that operating deficit that we've been talking about. That's $9.9 million. We do have the sale of the land, so that helped us this year. It's a one-time help, $5.4 million. So our current budget our current approved budget is showing us a deficit of $4.4 million. In the second column, based on our 5 months of actuals and based on our projections for the rest of the year, it's looking like our total operating revenues, again, net of recapture, are 129.6, which is a decrease. When we go down the top, total operating expenditures, those are projected at 135.7, which is a decrease, which gives us a operating deficit difference of $6.1 million. So what we're looking at for our projection for the end of the year is, instead of the 9.9 operating deficit, we're looking at more of a $6 million deficit.
That's good news.
That is good news. That is good news. We're tracking better than budget for this year. So then again, we have the land sale has been completed, so that stays the same, the $5.4 million. So we are projecting now a $608,000 deficit, which is much smaller than what we have currently approved in the budget. As we get actuals, we continue to monitor the budget. This is a very fluid exercise and the work that we do each month. But we will be bringing in a budget amendment as we get a little closer through these actuals. And this is what we're currently projecting. So let's look at kind of how we get to that 3.8 million. That was kind of that is to the good. If you look, you can see the first column again is the approved budget, and then the 22-23 revised projections of our key budget assumptions. It shows what we're now projecting. So enrollment is not as high as what we had originally projected. We've talked about that. And ADA is not either. And our ratio of enrollment to ADA is also lower. It's 91.6%. We've seen that because of COVID, because of the flu, we're not seeing those in attendance, daily average attendance that we saw pre-COVID. So if you go to that third column, it shows the increase or the decrease. So when we look at some of our major revenue items, like our local property tax collections, we're looking to get 2.5 million more than what we have in the budget. Investment earnings, interest rates have gone up. We're looking to get 325,000 more than what we have in the budget. Facility rentals and athletics, we are seeing higher actuals than what we budgeted. So that looks like an increase of 190,000. Our state funding, the available school fund, is based on our prior year ADA, and it was higher than what we had in the budget. So we're getting 1.2 million to the good on that. And then we get a reimbursement for our student health and related services, SHARS, and that was 268,000 more than what we had budgeted. So those are increases to the budget in the revenue area. And if you go down to expenditures, in our payroll expenditures, we're seeing a $5.9 million savings from what we originally budgeted. And then in our other non-payroll type expenditures, which are our contracted services and supplies, we're seeing a $950,000 decrease from the budget. And of course, our friend recapture, based on higher revenues and lower ADA, our recapture looks to be, it's going to be about $7.5 million more than what we budgeted.
Why is payroll
Yeah.
6 million less than budgeted?
That is mostly due to staffing,
Just unfilled
positions that we didn't fill.
And that's, so, and like, for example, when we ran these numbers, they were at 13.1 on enrollment. Right now, we're a little over 13.2 on enrollment, so we're still growing. But this was when we built the budget with expecting a steeper growth, right about the time interest rates changed and things started slowing down, so the growth slowed down. And our budget's built on the staffing model for a larger enrollment than what we have, and so we have not staffed all those positions. And so our approach to next year's budget is we won't be projecting growth beyond what we did this past year. So one of the things on our budget for next year is hold the line on staffing and the enrollment projections, so that basically staffing catches up to enrollment. And so we do not anticipate adding new positions to the budget for next year, because we have those positions in the budget now that have not been filled due to enrollment. And so there are some positions we're trying to hire that we've not been able to hire.
Yeah.
So this isn't,
Yeah.
So there's some vacancies that principals have that we want them to fill, right? So there's a difference there that can get confusing. So we have allocated full-time equivalents, FTEs, in the budget that we are not hiring, but there are vacancies we want them to hire because their staffing numbers warrant the need for that position. So there's two different things there. It's a budget number thing because we don't, and that's something, yes.
That amount right there
Uh-huh.
includes both the ones we know we aren't gonna fill and the ones that we could still potentially fill if we
That's
find
the
them.
savings that we're seeing.
Okay, before we knew we were doing better than we had approved in the budget, is there anything that, because we had to cinch our belt so that we could at least make payroll, is there anything that we're sacrificing, that we sacrificed?
Well, no, but that's where we start talking about next year, that we have a recommendation for you guys that we've not been able to discuss yet because we're digging in. And so first off, it feels like because we started these conversations earlier in the year, like I was thinking, gosh, shouldn't we be farther along? But we're like, well, no, wait a second. We just started earlier. But no, we'll be talking about how we approach next year because we're still working on internal reductions of the budget. But what we're looking at now is if we start going much farther, we can start compromising instructional support and programs that we think are making a difference. And so that's where if we cut too early, too fast without knowing what the monies are going to be, we may not be able to undo damage to culture and supports. So that's the balance that we're working through our professional judgment now. So we've not sacrificed anything, but depending on where state funding goes will warrant the degree that we would have to start cutting things that we think are going to be damaging to student progress.
And I did notice that they were modifying the special ed allotments, and hopefully that's one area that will get passed.
They have to modify that.
Because it's more than
Yes.
just instructional, it's
Yes.
a lot of support services.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And
So,
the
yeah.
vets still haven't come to, since 1975,
Right.
to the level that they had promised.
And with seeing the growth that we have in that area, I mean, we absolutely need that to get passed.
Yeah, and that's also the flip side, because at one time, our funding was based on instructional arrangement.
Mhm.
And what we found was everybody was being pushed into special ed. So that it's a yin and a yang.
And then they came up with their magic cap. Remember
Yes.
that? Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Real quick,
Go
which
ahead.
never was appropriate.
how does 3 million increase in revenue get us to a 7.5 million change in our recapture?
Right.
Well,
So-
I feel like we lost out
it's
pretty bad
not,
on
it's
that.
not a dollar for dollar.
Yeah,
And
obviously.
if you, one thing that we have to recall is that back when we were doing budget in May and June of 2022, we didn't even have our final
Tax.
values.
Right.
So there were they ran the template with the best information that they had. There's a lot of data elements in the summary of finance template, so it doesn't compute dollar for dollar. But that is where we are, based on running the template with current information.
But where you're seeing the increase in recapture is enrollment numbers versus property values. And so the only way we reduce recapture is by having more kids in the system. And that's why there's always just gonna be
And that's kids in the system or kids actually showing up at school?
Kids showing
Showing
up for
up,
ADA.
yeah.
Mhm, yeah.
which we were tracking as well, and then we've hit this sickness spell, and so hopefully in the spring, we've gotta keep pushing to get them back out, because we're seeing people, there's a lot of sickness going around right now, and I don't even know the newest variant or the newest thing. There's a lot of, where our attendance rates
When-
taking a hit.
When is our ADA final for money from the state?
It's not final until the end of the year, however, we track it every 6 weeks.
Sure.
So
But we don't turn those numbers in until, so if we do have a good spring and we have a push to get kids in the classroom, this
Right.
could change that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it
Significantly.
will change. In fact, this 11th out, the ADA that we're looking at really is through November, because this is when we were doing most of the work.
So that first wave of
Yeah.
flu and variant X, whatever it
And
was.
so we do have increased enrollment, so we feel like that number is conservative. We feel like we probably will come in better.
Okay.
And we do run this every 6 weeks, so we keep an eye on it. And we'll update you as we get more actual information. Any other questions on that? Okay. So let's just talk about recapture. None of us really like to talk about it, but we just want to remind everyone that that illustration on the right, shows that, yes, even if our taxes go up, it just means that we get less state aid, and then whatever is above goes back to the state. So that's, we're collecting that in taxes, and then we're sending that to the state.
I mean, really, that picture is misleading for recapture districts in the sense that, and this is the one that the state uses, but really, because that shows you keep your taxes, right? It shows that you keep your taxes, it might give you a little less state funding, and then really what that looks like to me is, we're gonna give you less state funding, but the state funding we didn't give you will go back to the state, which to me would be an appropriate use of the finance system. Really, taxes is the whole thing, taxes plus, plus, and then, so that $30 million difference between 21, 22, and $30 million are going back to the state budget from our district.
So $52 million recapture payment is unheard of as far as what we were expecting. And I received a phone call from a specific legislator in May of 2019 that says, y'all are only gonna have a recapture of 5 million and you're gonna get 11.8 million new to the budget. And that was, well, you remember the summer from what that was like. And then it just flipped. The whole thing flipped. And so for our recapture to go to 52 million, I don't know how the legislative session can survive that when you see to the degree that we are supplanting the state budget. Because that's $52 million of our local taxes that a taxpayer says are going to school budgets are actually going to the state general fund. That's $52 million of Georgetown tax dollars to the state general fund. There's nothing right about that system, and it's going to have to be addressed. Now, I know that you have, Jennifer has a conference call with our comptroller, Hager. They're doing a lot of work on trying to project what they're going to do, but I just don't see how this is sustainable in the legislative process, because I mean, look at that number from 21 to 22, 23, it's just, it's unheard of. So I don't know how that's gonna last, because we've only been paying recapture now since 2016 or 15, 16 I believe, 16 or 17 when we first started paying recapture, and it's taken off since then. So anyway, that's just the part of we can't solve this problem. It's just tough to tell people that, you know, we don't have more money, and like, well, yes, you do. My tax payments went way up. I said, yes, but we don't have more money. And last time I tried to explain that to the group, a community group I was speaking to, they understood it, but it's frustrating because I can't solve that problem. So.
And I do want to point out that that 52 million is projected, just like you were saying, on where we are now. So that number might move up or down. It might move down if we have more students,
Right.
which we think we probably will. So, but we'll be somewhere in between. It'll be close.
Do you have any idea what that shift is? Percent, like we increase our ADA 1%. Do you have any idea where?
I don't dollar for dollar. I know that right now our enrollment is sitting at 13,200, and our template, as of like a couple months ago, we were using 13,100. So we're about 100 students to the good.
And that's the other hard part about the formulas. So like my first superintendency, we were accepting transfers, and I had to figure out the formula for how many transfers I had to accept to get rid of our recapture payment. And that's what we did. That's what you
And
do.
how many was that?
72.
Okay, let's get on that.
And so, but it wasn't an exact, because, you know, it's their weighted program. What programs are they going to be in, et cetera. So there's a lot of weights in the formula. So it's hard to say if I can accept 20 kids, it's going to give me exactly this many dollars, because each kid's services look a little different.
Sure.
So.
Well, and that has been, and I think it's on one of our slides, one of the updates that I saw, quite a few bills were filed to propose that the funding goes to average enrollment instead of ADA, because at least then you have one number that's fluctuating in your number of kids that are there, not also a fluctuating number and an attendance number that are both, that just make predicting how much you're going to have really difficult.
Well, that was a superintendent conference call we were on where they're, you know, we'll get calls about pending legislation and such and discussing it, but districts all over are seeing this fluctuation in student attendance, but we're still providing services. And so for stability of staffing and all the things, we're trying, you know, there's an effort. And one of the superintendents that's working on that commissioner's cabinet group says they think there is some traction to being funded on enrollment, but there's processes they would put in place to verifying that enrollment and services provided. But the fluctuation with illnesses and people being out and being punitive to schools, who now when that kid comes out after being gone for 2 or 3 weeks, we have to provide additional services to catch them up. And so we're trying to see leverage in that legislation. We think there's potential there, so we're hoping. But at least they're having to acknowledge the fact that just because kids don't come to school does not mean we don't provide services. And actually, it comes in a hurry-up mode, trying to catch up when they do return. And it adds extra work on staff, especially your interventionists and such who are there to help kids. So anyway.
Hey, last question, I'll leave you.
No, you're good.
I'm out. Elizabeth says my last question for the day. Is it easy in your model to throw like our pre-COVID ADA numbers in there to see where we would, so we have a comparison to what that would have looked
You
like?
can do that.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Is it a quick just, hey, plug this cell and
It
we
is.
get
Yes.
magic numbers?
Yeah.
Would you do that for me? I'd love to see just kind of
Yeah.
that baseline comparison if we didn't have all of this that we can account and control, what we would look like today.
Yeah, we can run those.
Perfect. Thank you.
Probably come to you in like a week. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so we've talked about where we are currently now. We're trying to look at 23, 24. We've been, you know, as Dr. Brent said, we've been doing some work, trying to look at some, you know, data and just all that. So far, this is where we are with some potential budget cost savings that we have identified through our work. Here at Hammerlin, we've had 4 resignations that we have determined that we will not fill for next year. So we will see a savings from that. We're looking at some dual language program efficiencies that are currently available. That looks like we'll get 3 FTEs from that, so that's a cost savings. The transportation department has been looking at some routing efficiencies and overlapping some routes, so that gives us some cost savings. And then, as Dr. Brent talked about earlier, because we staffed to the 13,666 this year, and our enrollment was actually came in lower, we will absorb some of that going forward for next year as far as hiring.
And so we won't be adding to, so basically the easy way, we won't be adding to the current staffing numbers unless we see hard evidence that warrants that when we build next year's budget.
On
And
top of the ones that are currently posted that we are still
Right.
trying.
Yeah,
to-
yeah.
I mean, that's, yeah, and
Yeah,
that's
we need
the-
those.
That's
Yeah,
what I
we're
want people
trying
to hear,
get
like,
those, yeah.
yes, because if you're feeling the pain because there's a position posted that we haven't been able to hire, we still, that one's still on the list, it's just the ones that would be beyond that for more students that we would.
And what that looks like with our staff, for example, as enrollment, if places start growing more enrollment, well then, of course, obviously, we're going to work with the principal and the team and with Sue and make sure we, we allocate positions where they're warranted. But some of the previous practices, when you're growing, you're trying to add those numbers to support the projections, you're always playing the balancing act of overstaffing or understaffing. And, and we've talked about it before, but we understaffed one year, probably around 18 or 17, probably around 17 or 16. I don't remember which one of those years. It was just not good. We were trying to hire too many teachers too late in the year. And it was a mistake we made. Like, that was our decision and we missed it. And so we changed the approach with our demographer to trying to get the right number on projections there. But we believe that the growth trends we're seeing, we're talking with our demographer, and we're still working with the city, that since the mortgage rate changes from our original budget projections and staffing enrollment projections, we don't see that getting to that point that would warrant us to add units. And we'll keep watching the spring and keep you updated there.
And just to say, like, these are things that, we feel comfortable one way or another, putting it up on the board because we're good with those. There's 25 other things we're in talks with small groups and trying to figure out unintended and intended consequences too. So that as we go over the next couple months, we've done all the legwork before we make a decision to know what are we not seeing if we decide to talk about efficiencies in the way programs are run, or the way that we do professional learning, or the way that we look at materials that we buy, or things like that. All of those things are all on the list that we've been doing a lot of legwork over the last several months to understand the landscape, so that if there, I think I've told someone it kind of feels like, I don't remember if it's Risk or Stratego, the game where you're like kind of moving and trying to position everything around so that you can capture the target, but like it feels like that's what we're doing. We're doing a lot of investigating to move things closer so that if there's a moment we feel like we need to then move forward with some of these other areas, we've done a lot of the legwork in that process to know what's happening with that. So.
What do we attribute the reduction in dual language?
So the program coordinators have been talking about shifting the program at Carver, and regardless of whether that happens next year or the year after that when we do some elementary rezoning when we open our new elementary, that the Carver zone it really doesn't sustain a dual language program anymore, which is crazy because 5 years ago I would have never thought that. So the conversation that they've been having with principals and with families is that we'll need to start moving that program to eventually that we have Williams and Pearl on this side with that. But even without any movement of the program, we've been doing a lot of legwork in that program to figure out how to teach well with the staff that we have, because we know it's hard to find bilingual teachers, and split the minutes right and do all that. And we have been previously been really true to the one dual language teacher and an ESL teacher in a pair together. And even this year, our campuses, our teachers have gotten really creative about how to do that with a triad, because we couldn't find, we've got 2 bilingual and we have 1 ESL, and we're doing it that way. And then we can have more kids in those classes and not numbers of 12, 13 in a class, but we can actually put more kids into those classes. Or you have one teacher going self-contained and as a bilingual teacher and teaching that. So depending on the structure of each school, they've already started to work some of those efficiencies, but without even shifting programs from Harvard, we feel like we can, knowing the kids that are coming up through the program for the remainder for next year, we have 3 people, and we won't cut people, it'll be through attrition that we can condense some classes and like
So is on the dual language, is the change that you just happened to see at Carver, is it because not as much interest from non-Spanish speaking families, or is it because there wasn't the number of students who needed bilingual services? So,
Right.
So
the second. It's really, the neighborhoods that have popped up around there, we're seeing a higher influx on the Williams side, and then lower percentages now on the Carver side of our zones for needing services.
Okay. So in some cases, you do just have a self-contained class for bilingual.
We do.
Because it works.
Yes.
Or the numbers work.
Yes.
Yeah, I get it.
And if we could magically find more bilingual teachers, it makes
Yeah.
your flexibility a lot higher, but it's just really hard to find bilingual teachers.
Okay, so let's talk about some potential revenue sources that we also have been looking at. We've talked about the legislative session. There may be an adjustment to the basic allotment. They're also talking about potentially moving to attendance versus enrollment, and that would help districts. We expect an increase in student enrollment. That will bring revenue to us. We've also started talking about potentially charging some federal grant indirect costs to the general fund. That would help the general fund. That is something that we are exploring. We have looked at potentially an increase to facility rentals. That would bring in more revenue to the district. And then with the interest rates rising, we can get some additional investment earnings through that. So those are potential revenue sources that we've kind of been exploring.
So this is where Jennifer and Terry, or even anyone in the room, can step in here, but these are the things that we're working on budget next steps that we need to be thinking about. And I'm going to just talk to you about the things that have us, I'll say us, have me anxious. Okay, I'm not going to speak for anyone else. So our team will continue meeting with principals and district staff, and we're happy to talk to you in the future about all the things we've considered reducing and what to reduce and not reduce, and where we are making reductions in the budget. But the tightening of the belt comment, Stephanie talking about the things that we sacrificed, that's what we're most leery of, okay? So here's the deal. We know that we're going to need to find a way to give a pay increase for next year. We need to prepare to give a pay increase next year. Over the summer, what that's going to look like, we'll be working on that. We'll keep going through savings and efficiencies, do all the things. As we watch the legislative session and try to prepare for what action we think they're going to take. All that to say is what I'm working on from my professional judgment, it is we still have a deficit budget. Just because we had the land sale, that's a temporary fix, that's not going to be back next year. So we are still looking at the potential of a $6 million deficit budget going into next year, and how we're going to make the reductions. That is, and what's going to alleviate that deficit is continued growth in student enrollment. Now we know or are told everything that we understand, and my 17 years of being a school superintendent tells you the basic allotment is going to be adjusted. What we don't know is how much of that adjustment is going to be committed to certain things that we have no control over. So we're advocating for less restrictions to the basic allotment adjustment. The best example I can give you as to what you will more than likely see us going into the summer with another deficit budget because, and here's the best example I can give you, my son's freshman year of high school was like, wait a second, 1/4 of your high school experience is going to be spent in basketball, right? He's graduated now, he's going to talk about it. It was basketball. To the point of, we adjusted to a modified block, and this is a ballpark number. But by going to the modified block so that kids could take more options, you added about 6 or so career technical education FTEs to allow kids to have more diverse instructional program offerings. So if we start to find true deep savings in costs, you're going to start messing with a master schedule that can start damaging student experience and instructional supports that have been a focused effort on pursuing student performance. And we're still pursuing that improved student performance. So we are looking at all of our systems, like you'll be hearing us talk about assessment systems, like, hey, we were using this one, it cost us this much money, but now we've gotten better and we think we can use this system. And we'll be filling in on that information. What we're worried about right now is that not knowing what the basic allotment adjustment is going to be. You will see districts that are going to go all in and say, it doesn't matter what, we're going to bring a balanced budget based on this deal, and they will wreak havoc on their systems and their culture. And then in July, you're not going to be able to undo that damage and try to hire people back. So if we start reducing instructional supports that can cost us personnel right now, we believe that, knowing that there's an adjustment to the basic allotment coming, we believe that we would be telling people their job's going to change and then trying to bring them back in July because a decision's been made. So if there's anyone taking a gamble here, it's me, in that everything I know, it's not a gamble. Please don't print, I say gamble. I'm not putting it on black to win, I promise. It is that we have another year to see where the funding dust settles. If I knew that the basic allotment wasn't going to change, we would have already made instructional program recommendations that would have possibly hurt the instructional supports we provide and the student experiences we provide. But it's what we had to do. So we think we're a budget cycle away. We did not go into that at the beginning of the year thinking that this would be where we would end up. But the more we dug, the more we realized that, and then we've learned that the basic allotment is going to be adjusting, and we've seen the values continue to trend the way they are. And so everything tells us across the board, you're going to get more money, we just don't know exactly how much. And so we're afraid that any drastic measures now are going to hurt campus experiences to the degree that we can't undo them when we realize what that number is. And so we would go into the fall knowing with greater clarity, okay, we know now for the next 2 years or so, our funding is not going to change. So the only way to survive that is to start changing these services and start changing some master schedules. If we went too early and adjusted things like master schedule at the high school, we could lose valuable employees, we could lose valuable student experiences. We just think it would be too early. Knowing that it's going to expect us to have another deficit budget, that we will work to make it less than what we originally thought it was. And so that's just sort of the landscape of what we're expecting. We will be bringing you ratios that shows where we are on student to instructional support ratios. We will be bringing you numbers that show our administrative cost ratios to make sure that we can tell the community, yes, here's how we staff compared to other people. By and large, we have had a better instructional support to student ratio than our peers. The only district that was better than us 2 years ago was Eames. And so with all of that, we will keep giving you updates, and we're going to have some decisions to make in February, March, and April. But we are expecting to go into the budget cycle knowing that unless they make changes, we'll have a deficit budget. We do believe there will be changes made to where the deficit will not be as great as it would be should they not make changes. And then in the fall, you would know as a board, okay, Fred, here you go now, this is the number you're gonna have to live with. How are you and your team gonna build us a budget from here? And that's, we didn't take the hit to fund balance that we thought we were gonna take. We feel like if we can buy time, that's, yeah, my favorite thing in George Bush's Decision Points book was, when you can buy time, right? We think we can afford to buy time right now. And I don't like that that's where we are, but I think I just have to tell you that's what I think we're gonna have to face. And in that deficit, we will need to have a compensation increase for staff. So,
What's the bottom end of the fund balance we're comfortable depleting that to? Like, what's our hard?
Well, our target has always been 20 to 30%.
Right, and we're at 20 now,
yeah.
so that's not the question. What's the hard
Yeah.
bottom? If we're gonna get uncomfortable, how uncomfortable are we willing to get? And you don't have to answer it today,
Yeah,
but
I
when we
think
start,
I think that's a very valid question.
when
I think that's
we
something we're
start,
gonna
when we
have to
start
go
looking at these numbers and making these decisions to
Yeah.
protect our programs and our teachers and still be able to find ways to recruit, retain, and give money where it's due, we kinda need to be
So
making
we
that
owe you
assumption
that
from-
bottom dollar fund balance.
Yeah, hey, this is it, like, at this, we're all in agreement that we have to make some really hard choices at
Yeah.
that point.
The current budget that we are under right now is at about 16%. So we're a little lower than where we
We
would
would
like
want
to
to,
be
okay.
before any kind of budget amendments
Sure.
for projections.
So there's something out there called the Jobs and Employment for Texas Grant, the JET grant for CTE programs. Have we looked into grants that could probably help us?
I'm not sure about that one in particular. Yes, we have a lot of grants that we're currently operating with and ones that we'll keep an eye on. What has been frustrating about the grants that have been provided, in large in part, they are tied specifically to vendors that you have to use, that unless you're willing to use the vendors that the state has adopted, even if you prove what you want to use is just as good or better. And so there had, and Carol, bless her heart, her team has been working under so many grants under multiple years that you think the money is great and then it ends up honestly costing you because the capacity that it takes to use, and then you can't use it in the way that you want, and you kind of trickle out this money for the couple things that the state will allow you to do, to the point where honestly the state of Texas took, we had these grants called T-Class, we applied, we have several that we are utilizing to run, like our after school action program, which has been fantastic. We've doubled that in size. Our House Bill 45 tutoring, things like that. But so much of that money went unspent by school districts because it had so many strings to it. They came back and then they just rebranded it as LASSO grants. And so now there's LASSO ones that you can apply to because school districts are finding it very difficult with the number of strings and vendors and rules that are attached to the money that it sounds like they're giving to districts. They're not trusting us to use it. We have to use the vendors that they're saying and the programs that they want, and it's very difficult. But absolutely, we've been looking through as many as we possibly can. One of the ones in particular is providing a little bit of money for our CTE education and teaching teachers there. The program that we're doing with our Human Resources Department in order to help paras become teachers, that's been a great grant through the program. But a lot of them don't cover current operating, a lot of them are grants to do stuff beyond that. It's hard to find ones that would then help with the cost that you're already incurring. It really is money that's like, well, if you want to do this extra thing above that, it's like, well, no, I need money to cover this fundamental tier 1 things that we're doing here. So.
No such thing as free money.
Absolutely not.
And so in coming months, obviously email questions about any curiosities or wonders about budget, and they'll be kicked over to the team, and we'll try to make sure we get you information. We'll look into what we know about the JET grant, Stephanie, but what we'll be owing you and expecting to give you is just more reports on different things we're working through with district staff. We'll we'll have meetings in the room with everybody, and it's over a budget, and say, okay, what are we gonna work on cutting back? Also knowing at the same time we have some big months coming up, we will be moving forward with strategic planning work to try to get that wrapped up in March. We have some student updates on student progress on teaching and learning and assessments and student growth. We have a lot of different information coming in to start reviewing and discussing. While this is our third workshop, the team is, we keep saying, okay, what is it that we need to, where's the reductions need to come? And so far, we're continuing to whittle away at all the reductions that don't touch student supports. And it's gonna be tight, so there will be tightening belts in other budgets, and there have been, and there will continue to be that. And one of the things was, someone on the team said, we cannot cut any more in this budget. We've taken it way down. But I feel like, though, one of the things that we'll be working on is telling you just what some of those things are, because it's hard, if we say, yeah, we've tightened the belt, well, how have you made adjustments? What have you done? What are you doing without? So we will be working to tell you what the things that we're doing without truly are, and what the consequences of those are. Because, when we make those reductions, we want to understand what we're doing and why, so.
That's all we have for
Is that it?
Yeah, just.
Any other questions around all of that, or thoughts or wonderings, or?
No, thanks for getting up to speed so quick on everything.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
Hey, we're glad Jennifer's here. We're glad Jennifer's here.
Appreciate that. Okay, next slide.
Sure it was there.
Last slide is just a reminder about.
That's a Tuesday is the next board meeting.
Right. Next Tuesday.
Not
And
a week
next
from today, is it?
workshop
Is it a
will
week from tomorrow?
have
It is.
Yeah.
middle of the year announced.
Yeah.
Next
Go ahead.
week, so, yeah.
Yes.
And they're closed, so we're in the process of running that. Amplify is not closed, so I'm not sure that, we'll have that in February, but middle school. Or middle of the year. And CBAS.
Yep.
24 minutes, you can stretch out.
Sounds good.
Next workshop will be a little lengthier, more than likely, so we'll try to be concise. But, thank you for allowing us to have the conversation, and we will just keep you informed anytime we hear something. I think Jennifer's doing a good job of staying on top of the legislative changes and what's happening out there. So I was glad to hear that she's having the meetings she's having. It's reassuring to me to know that she's on those things, so we're good.
Me too.
Yes, yeah.
Let us know if there's ever any epiphany from them.
First to know.
All right, thank you guys.